The massive space station floated in the darkness like a glittering jewel. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its ports, but none of their crews moved with confidence. They walked quickly through the corridors, heads down, speaking in whispers. Fear lived in every shadow of the Andromeda trade nexus. Commander Minho sat in the human section of the station, watching the alien traders through the large windows. His second-in-command, Captain Haijin, brought him a cup of coffee and sat down beside him. "They're all terrified," she said quietly, nodding toward a group of tall, blue-skinned aliens who were practically running between meetings. "Every single species we've met acts the same way." Minho took a sip of his coffee and frowned. The briefings mentioned something called the Dread. Apparently it's been controlling this part of the galaxy for thousands of years. "What exactly is it?" Haijin asked. "Nobody knows for sure. Some kind of ancient force that feeds on fear. The aliens say it can reach into your mind and show you your worst nightmares. Most species won't even travel outside their home systems anymore because of it." As if summoned by their conversation, a reptilian creature approached their table. It was Ambassador Veltar from the Hegemony Council. His scales were pale with fear, and his hands shook as he sat down without being invited. "Commander?" "Minho," the alien said through his translation device. "I must warn you about your people's recent activities. Your exploration ships have been detected near the Forbidden Zones." "Which zones?" Minho asked calmly. "The Veil Nebula?" "The Ghost Systems. Places where the Dread lives and hunts. Your species must learn to avoid these areas, as all civilized beings do." Hijin leaned forward. "Ambassador, how long has your people been avoiding these areas?" 3,000 years, Veltar replied immediately. "Since the Dread first appeared and began consuming entire star systems. It doesn't just kill, it drives minds to madness with pure terror. Those who encounter it either die from fear or become hollow shells unable to function, and you've just accepted this." Minho asked. The alien looked shocked by the question. "What choice do we have? The Dread is beyond fighting. It is like asking how one fights a black hole or a supernova. Some forces are too powerful for mortals to challenge." Minho's communication device beeped. He answered it, and the voice of Captain Bioram came through clearly. She was commanding the exploration ship Inchin's Hope. "Commander, we're approaching the edge of the Veil Nebula. The alien crew members we brought for cultural exchange are unconscious. They collapsed the moment we entered the outer edge of the nebula. But sir, the human crew is fine. We're seeing some strange readings, but nobody's having nightmares or panic attacks." Veltar's eyes went wide with terror. "Your ship is in the Veil Nebula. Impossible. No vessel has entered that region and returned in over a millennium." Captain Boromino said into his communicator, "What's your assessment?" "Sir, whatever the Dread is, it's definitely real. I can feel something trying to get into my head. It's like, imagine someone trying to scare you with a monster. Movie you've already seen 50 times. It's unpleasant, but not paralyzing." Around the human section of the station, other aliens had stopped their activities to listen. Word was spreading quickly through their various communication networks. Some species representatives were already packing up to leave the station entirely. Commander Boram's voice continued, "We're detecting massive energy signatures deeper in the nebula. This thing, whatever it is, has been feeding here for a very long time. But sir, it seems like it doesn't understand why we're not running away." Haijin looked at the ambassador. "How many species have encountered the Dread over the years?" "Hundreds," Veltar whispered. Every single one learned to fear it within moments of first contact. It is the way of all intelligent life. We recognize ultimate predators and avoid them. But humans aren't avoiding it," Minho said thoughtfully. "Your species will learn," the ambassador insisted. "Perhaps you are simply too primitive to understand the danger. Once the Dread focuses its attention on you, you will discover what true terror means." Another voice came over Minho's communicator. This time, it was Captain Jinwoo from the ship Daegu Runner. "Command, we're getting reports from multiple human vessels. We've made contact with the Dread in 6 different locations. Every encounter is similar. Our alien crew members are catatonic with fear, but human crew members are maintaining functionality. The entity seems to be having difficulty affecting us. The station's main communication array suddenly crackled to life with an emergency broadcast. Captain Esiochin's voice filled the chamber. All vessels. This is the Guangzhou Star. We have made direct contact with the Dread's primary manifestation. It's trying to communicate with us. The message is simple. Why do you not fear? Altar stood up so quickly he knocked over his chair. This is impossible. The Dread does not communicate, simply consumes and destroys. Minho smiled grimly. Ambassador, I think your ancient enemy is about to learn something about humanity. We've been afraid before. We've got better at it. Captain Borum stood on the bridge of the Ancient's Hope, staring at something that shouldn't exist. The thing, floating in space before them, looked like a massive cloud of living darkness. It twisted and writhed like smoke, but Borum could see strange lights pulsing deep inside it. The readings on her instruments made no sense. The entity was both energy and matter at the same time. Status report, she called to her crew. Lieutenant Sangman checked his console. Captain, the alien crew members are still unconscious in the medical bay. Dr. Yan says they're alive, but their brain activity shows pure terror. It's like their minds shut down to protect themselves. What about our people? All human crew members are functioning normally. We can feel something trying to get into our heads, but it's not working the same way. Borum nodded. She could feel it too, a cold presence pressing against her thoughts, looking for cracks to slip through. But instead of overwhelming fear, she felt something else. Anger. Her grandmother had lived through war and famine. Her father had worked in dangerous mines to feed his family. She came from a long line of people who faced scary things and kept going anyway. Science Officer Geneseo, what are you reading? Lieutenant Geneseo looked up from his instruments, his face pale but steady. Captain, this thing is broadcasting. Fear on multiple frequencies. But there's something strange. It's getting confused by our responses. It keeps trying different approaches, like it's never encountered mines that don't break immediately. The bridge lights dimmed as the Dread pressed closer to their ship. Through the view screen, B.O. Arm could see tentacles of darkness reaching toward them. Each one carried images, flashes of humanity's worst fears, projected directly into their minds. She saw nuclear war destroying cities. She saw a plague sweeping across Earth. She saw the sun burning out and leaving humanity alone in the cold dark. She saw her own death in a dozen different ways. For a moment, the terror was overwhelming. Then she remembered something her grandfather had told her. Fear is just your body getting ready to fight or run. The choice of which one to do is still yours. Engineering, give me full power to the shields, she ordered. Captain, came the voice of Engineer Dalho. The alien engineers are unconscious too, but I've got human techs keeping everything running. This thing is trying to overload our systems with some kind of psychic energy, but our equipment seems to be handling it. Through her headset, Boiram heard reports from other human ships in the area. Captain Wanbin, from the Busan Explorer, was having similar experiences. Captain Miyong, from the Soul Defender, reported that the Dread had actually retreated when her crew started singing old work songs from Earth. Sir, Geneseo called out, I'm detecting massive changes in the entity's energy patterns. It's pulling back from us. On the view screen, the writhing mass of darkness was indeed moving away from their ship. But Borum could sense its attention was still focused on them, studying them like a scientist might study a new type of bacteria. Then it spoke. The voice came through their communication systems, but also directly into their minds. It sounded like the death of stars, like the last breath of dying worlds. What are you? It asked. Why do you not submit? Why do you not break? Bioram looked around her bridge. Her crew was scared. She could see it in their faces. Today, we're still at their posts, still doing their jobs. Fear hadn't made them helpless. Open a channel, she ordered. Captain, are you sure that's wise? Sangmin asked. We're making first contact with something that's terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. I'd say normal diplomatic rules don't apply. She stood up and faced the view screen. This is... Captain Borum of the Earth ship Inchin's Hope, you asked what we are? We're human. Human. The dread repeated the word like it was tasting something bitter. I have touched your minds. I have shown you death. I have shown you extinction. Why? Do you still function? Barm thought about how to answer. Because being afraid and being helpless aren't the same thing. You showed us death. We've seen death. You showed us war. We've survived wars. You showed us extinction. We faced that too, and we're still here. The darkness pulsed, and Borum felt the dread probing deeper into human memories. But instead of finding weakness, it found something else. It found the memory of humans who had faced down wild animals with nothing but fire and stone tools. It found memories of people who had sailed across unknown seas, not knowing what waited on the other side. It found memories of humans who had looked at the stars and decided they belonged there too. Impossible, the dread whispered. All species learn to fear. All species learn to submit. It is the natural order. Maybe Bjorn said, but we're not very good at following orders. The entity's form shuddered, and for the first time in thousands of years, the dread experienced something new. It felt uncertain, and in that uncertainty, the galaxy's first crack of hope began to grow. Admiral Sujin walked into the enormous meeting hall on the space station. The room was so large that her footsteps echoed off the walls. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat in curved rows, their various forms creating a strange rainbow of colors and shapes. Some looked like giant insects, others like living crystals, and a few resembled walking trees. But they all had one thing in common: they were terrified. The human delegation took their seats in the center of the room. Behind them, large screens showed star maps with areas marked in red. These were the zones where the dread lived and hunted. For the first time in thousands of years, some of those red zones now had blue dots in them. Human ships that had entered and survived. Elder Humsong, a massive crystalline being that spoke through musical tones, began the meeting. Admiral Sujin of the human fleet, we have called this council because your species has done something impossible. You have entered the forbidden zones and returned. We must understand how. Sujin stood up and looked around the room. Wouldn't even meet her eyes. Honored delegates, we didn't do anything special. We just refused to let fear make our decisions for us. A chittering sound came from the insect-like Zektar delegation. Their speaker, a creature that looked like a praying mantis crossed with a spider, translated, Admiral, your words suggest. You do not understand the true power of the dread. It has destroyed entire civilizations. It has turned brave warriors into cowering children with a single touch of their minds. I understand it's powerful, Sujin replied. But I also understand that it's been getting fat and lazy for 3,000 years. When you don't have to work for your meals, you get soft. An angry buzzing filled the room. The representatives were upset by her casual tone when discussing their greatest fear. Elder Humsong's tones became sharp and discordant. Admiral, perhaps your species is simply too young to comprehend the danger? The dread is not merely an enemy, it is a force of nature, like gravity or entropy. One does not declare war on the laws of physics. Sujin smiled. Elder, my ancestors thought the same thing about fire, about disease, about the vacuum of space. We have a saying on Earth, the laws of nature are more like suggestions. We've been breaking impossible rules for thousands of years. A new voice spoke up from the back of the room. It was Engineer Minet from the Resonance Collective, her crystal body glowing with unusual patterns. Admiral, if your species truly believes this enemy can be defeated, my people have kept records from the last resistance. 3,000 years ago, many species tried to fight the dread. We saved their weapons and strategies, hoping someone might be brave enough to use them again. Sujin's eyes lit up. Engineer Minet, that's exactly what we need to hear. The crystalline being's glow intensified. The ancient alliances had powerful weapons, energy shields that could block psychic attacks, and battle strategies designed for fighting entities that exist partly outside normal space. But they failed because they fought defensively. They were always retreating, always trying to minimize their losses. What would you do differently? Sujin asked. Takmane said simply. The old alliances tried to contain the dread, but containment is just another form of surrender. To truly win, you must go to its source and eliminate it. The room erupted in chaos. Representatives from multiple species started shouting, chittering, and making various distress sounds. The idea of actually attacking the dread was beyond their comprehension. Commander Jeho, Sujin's tactical officer, stood up. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been analyzing the dread's behavior patterns. It's not omnipotent. It's a parasite that has grown dependent on easy prey. When we entered its territory, it didn't know how to handle resistance. It's been controlling the galaxy through fear for so long that it's forgotten how to actually fight. A small, furry creature from the Yiptar Confederation squeaked in terror. You want to make it angry? You want to force it to remember how to fight? It's already angry, Sujin replied. We've proven that its control isn't absolute. Now it's going to come after us, whether we hide or fight back. The only question is whether we face it on our terms or its terms. Elder Humsong's tones became questioning, and if your plan fails, if the dread destroys your entire species, Sujin was quiet for a moment. Then at least our children will die free instead of living as slaves to fear. The room fell silent. For several minutes, the only sound was the nervous shuffling and breathing of hundreds of alien beings processing this concept. Finally, Engineer Minne spoke again. The Resonance Collective will provide the ancient weapons and tactical data. His second voice came from the Kethver delegation. The Hegemony will provide ships if humans lead the assault. One by one, other species began volunteering resources. They were still terrified, but for the first time in 3,000 years they were more afraid of living in fear than they were of fighting back. Admiral Sujin nodded. Then let's give this ancient bully something it's never faced before, a galaxy that's decided to grow up. Outside the station, human warships began gathering. The galaxy's first rebellion in millennia was about to begin. Captain Youngji gripped her chair as the Busan runner shook violently. Around her ship, the largest fleet in galactic history moved through space that had been forbidden for 3,000 years. Human vessels led the formation, their crews serving as anchors of courage for the alien ships following behind. Report? She called to her bridge crew. Lieutenant Wu Jin checked his instruments. Captain, we're approaching the Fear Heart. The alien ships are barely holding formation. The Resonance Collective vessels are using their harmonic fields to create comm zones, but even they're struggling. On the main screen, space itself looked wrong. Stars bent in impossible directions. Colors that had no name swirled through the darkness. The Fear Heart wasn't just a location where the dread lived. It was a wound in reality, where the creature had fed for so long that it had changed the basic rules of how things worked. Science Officer Yujin, what are your readings? Doctor. Han Yujin looked up from her console, sweat beading on her forehead. Captain, I've been studying the psychic patterns since we entered this region. The dread isn't just eating fear, it's preventing growth. Every species it touches stops developing, stops taking risks, stops trying to become something better. It's like it's performing surgery on the galaxy's ability to evolve. Through her earpiece, Yunji heard reports from other ships in the fleet. Captain Duhayan from the Soul Hammer reported that his alien crew members were finally fighting instead of hiding. Captain Nara from the Daegu Shield said the Kethver warriors on her ship were actually singing battle songs for the first time. In centuries, incoming transmission from Admiral Sujin, Wujin announced. The Admiral's face appeared on the screen. All ships, this is command. We're about to enter the core region where the dread is strongest. Remember your training. Fear is information, not instruction. Use it to stay alert, but don't let it control your actions. The fleet pushed deeper into the twisted space around the Fear Heart. Human ships took the most dangerous positions there, cruise mines serving as shields for the more vulnerable alien vessels. Behind them, species that hadn't shown courage in millennia pressed forward, drawing strength from humanity's stubborn refusal to give up. Then the attacks began. The dread struck at each ship individually, probing for weaknesses. It showed the humans images of Earth burning, of their families dying, of their species going extinct in the cold void between stars. It showed the aliens their ancient nightmares, the memories of worlds consumed and civilizations broken. But something had changed. The alien crews, inspired by watching humans face their fears, began to fight back. Kethper warriors roared defiance instead of cowering. Resonance Collective engineers sang songs of hope instead of funeral dirges. Even the small, furry Yiptar began making battle cries in their squeaky voices. "Captain," Eugene called out, "the fear heart is responding to our presence. It's trying to communicate." Through the ship's speakers came a voice like the collapse of galaxies. "Why do you resist? I offer safety. I offer peace. I protect you from the dangers of ambition and growth. Why do you choose suffering?" Youngji stood up and faced the main screen. Around her, she could feel the presence of every ship in the fleet, human and alien alike. Because safety without choice isn't living. Because peace without freedom is just another kind of prison. "Do not understand," the dread continued. "I have seen species reach for the stars and burn themselves to nothing. I have watched civilizations grow too quickly and collapse into chaos. I prevent this pain. Keeps the galaxy stable. You keep it dead," Yunji replied. "Growth requires risk. Learning requires failure. You haven't been protecting anyone. You've been preventing them from becoming what they could be." The space around them pulsed with dark energy. The dread was getting angry, but for the first time in thousands of years, its anger came with uncertainty. It had never encountered resistance like this. "The small species that calls itself human," it said, focusing its attention on Yunji's ship, "you are young and foolish. You do not know what true fear means. Let me educate you." The attack that followed was unlike anything the dread had ever unleashed. It reached deep into human memory, pulling up not just individual fears, but species-wide trauma. It showed them every war, every plague, every natural disaster that had ever threatened to wipe out humanity. But instead of breaking them, the memories had the opposite effect. Each image of human suffering was matched by an image of human endurance. Every disaster was paired with the story of how people had survived and rebuilt. Every ending was followed by a new beginning. "You made a mistake," Yunji said, her voice carrying across all communication channels to every ship in the fleet. "You showed us our history, but our history isn't about being victims, it's about being survivors." Around the fear heart reality began to shift. The twisted space started to straighten. Stars returned to their proper positions. The dread's absolute control over this region was breaking down as thousands of minds refused to accept that fear should rule their lives. For the first time in 3,000 years, the dread felt something it had forgotten existed: doubt. "Commander." Dong Haiyan floated in his spacesuit through what had once been the heart of galactic terror. The fear heart was gone, replaced by something that looked almost normal. Stars arranged in proper patterns. Space that followed the usual rules of physics. But the strangest sight was the small station that now occupied the center of this region, built from the remains of the dread's ancient stronghold. "Status report, Lieutenant So-young," he said into his communicator as he drifted toward the stations. "Docking bay, sir. The final casualty count is complete. 37,000 humans lost, along with 2 million alien allies. But Commander, the transformation is spreading across the entire galaxy. Species that haven't left their home systems in thousands of years are launching exploration missions." Dong Haiyan nodded sadly. The price had been heavy, but it was paid. Willingly. Captain Yunji had given her life in the final assault, at flying her ship directly into the dread's core when conventional weapons failed. Her sacrifice had broken something fundamental in the ancient entity's structure. Inside the station, he found an amazing sight. The control center was staffed by beings from dozens of species, all working together to monitor the galaxy's transformation. At the center of it all stood a figure that had once been their greatest enemy. The dread still existed, but it was changed. For once there had been a writhing mass of darkness. Now, there was something that looked almost human-shaped, made of shifting shadows and starlight. It was studying data displays with what appeared to be curiosity instead of hunger. Commander Dong Han, it said, its voice no longer carrying the sound of dying worlds. I have been reviewing historical records. I believe I may have been incorrect in my methods. That's one way to put it. Dong Han replied carefully. He still felt nervous around the entity. But it was the normal kind of nervousness you'd feel meeting any powerful being, not the mind-crushing terror of before. I was trying to protect the galaxy from the pain of growth, the dread continued. But I see now that growth requires pain. A muscle must be torn to become stronger. A mind must be challenged to become wise. I was preventing the very thing I claimed to protect. Through the station's windows, Dong Han could see ships from hundreds of species moving freely through space that had been forbidden territory just months ago. The galaxy was waking up from a 3,000-year nightmare. Sir So-young's voice came through his communicator again, receiving reports. From the Outer Rim, the Kethver have established 3 new colonies. The Resonance Collective is composing something they call celebration music. Apparently the first happy songs in their recorded history, and the Yiptar Confederation just announced they're planning to explore beyond their home system for the first time ever. The transformed dread turned toward him. The species you call human taught me something important. Fear is meant to be information, not control. It should tell you about danger, not paralyze you. I spent millennia using fear as a cage, when it should have been used as a teacher. What will you do now? Dong Han asked. Learn, the dread replied. Simply, I have fragments of myself scattered across the galaxy. Some are still hostile. They will need to be dealt with. Others are confused and will need guidance. Few have already begun helping species overcome their remaining fears. I intend to spend the next few centuries understanding what I prevented and trying to repair the damage. A new voice joined their conversation. Admiral Sujin's image appeared on the station's main communications screen. Commander, how's our reformed cosmic horror doing? Better than expected, Admiral? It's actually being helpful? Sujin smiled. Good to hear. Commander, I have news from Earth. The Global Council has approved the construction of a memorial on Luna. It will honor all the beings who died fighting for the galaxy's freedom, human and alien alike. What will the inscription say? Dong Han asked. They taught us that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else is more important than fear. Here lie those who chose to light candles rather than curse the darkness. The dread's form shimmered. May I make a suggestion for the memorial? Both humans looked at the entity with surprise. Add this. Fear is the beginning of wisdom, not the end of hope. Admiral Sujin nodded approvingly. I think that works perfectly. Dong Han looked around the station one more time. Beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history in terror were now working together, planning expeditions, creating art, and doing all the messy, wonderful things that living creatures do when they're not paralyzed by fear. Outside, a group of young beings from multiple species played together. In the station's recreation area, they were the first generation in galactic history to grow up without the weight of cosmic terror hanging over their heads. They laughed, argued, competed, and dreamed of adventures among the stars. Dong Han said to the transformed. Dread, I think this is going to work out just fine. The entity that had once ruled through fear watched the children play and felt something it had never experienced before. Hope. The galaxy was finally free to grow up.